We are at the Fletcher Free Library for Ward 8 for the town meeting day in Burlington.
Here we have candidates Allie and Hannah posted outside, and we're curious to see how voting goes.
So what brings you out here today?
Yeah, so my name's Allie. I'm a student here. I'm also a social worker in the community. You know, like we're out here fighting for like climate justice, housing justice, like mental health, public safety, racial justice, all that stuff. I've been down to testify at City Council about a couple issues sort of in my social work capacity. And yeah, kind of just got involved that way. Question 5, which removes like stigmatizing language around sex work from our city laws. I think that's important.
Number 5 on the ballot, and concerns about decriminalizing pimping and brothel owning and sex buying in Burlington, and what that means sort of for all of Vermont, for vulnerable people in Burlington, and sort of the bait and switch that this was something that came about as an archaic and offensive language change, which we agree that the language is archaic. And we also support decriminalizing those bought and sold in prostitution, but holding pimps, brothel owners, and sex buyers accountable.
So hi everybody, my name is Saja Mughali, and I am a write-in candidate for Ward 8 for the Burlington School District. First of all, the first thing is, in Burlington right now, there is no Burlington High School anymore. The school is closed and shut down, so every student in the Burlington High School has to go to the mall downtown to teach and study. And that is a big problem right now, because who wants to like study in a mall? And so yeah, like the first thing probably we're gonna do is like vote for a new budget so we can reopen the school and build it. And that's the most important thing, of course.
I'm collecting petition signatures for 2 charter changes. One is going to expand direct democracy in Burlington by expanding the right of petition to include changes to the City Code of Ordinance. And the other is in support of creating an independent board that could investigate and discipline police officers accused of misconduct. It is your civic duty. It is the way you participate in politics and do your thing. And with Proposition 0, we're looking to expand that to make it even easier to participate.
I want to make sure that as many people vote as possible. I want to make sure that people are like informed about what they're voting on, and more importantly, or most importantly, inform them that there is an election today. Just knowing that local politics is really important, that like what happens here and who wins this race and the other local races like will dictate things like housing policy in Burlington, will dictate things like parking policy, will determine how our parks look and parks and recreation and many other important issues, and these are issues that affect all of us.
I'm just exercising my right to vote. I'm mostly concerned about city councilor for my ward. I'm going to be voting for Allie House.
Wonderful. And why is that?
She came to a club meeting of mine, and I met her, and she was very nice, and I really liked how passionate she was about the issues that she cared about. And I thought someone like that would be good to represent me.
Thank you to Town Meeting Television's Jordan Mitchell, who is there with students from the Community News Service talking to some of the voters in Ward 8, which we'll be talking about quite a bit tonight. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us here on Town Meeting Television's annual Town Meeting coverage. I'm Mark Johnson, along with Diane Meyerhoff. We're going to be following the results tonight of 5 key communities here in Chittenden County: Burlington, South Burlington, Winooski, Essex, and in Williston. Burlington, of course, will be our big focus. There are a number of contested races there. In fact, the balance of power on the City Council is in play. There are 8 of the 12 seats that are being contested today. 5 of those seats are actually going to have contests. There are 3 races where incumbents or there are no challengers running, and there's only 1 person on the ballot. Also in Burlington, there are a number of key money issues. The school board is asking for an increase in taxes. The city is as well, first time in 3 years. There are also 2 fairly significant other money issues. One includes a bond that will be paying, if approved, for items like fire trucks. And also there is another proposal on the ballot that deals with what's called a tax increment financing district. Diane will explain all of that to you. That, in essence, will allow the city to do some improvements down on Main Street. In South Burlington, we have 2 incumbents that are being challenged on the city council, and also in Winooski. This is really just incredible, a great example of civic participation. There are 7 people that are running for 2 open seats, and in Williston, a community that's really changed over the years and has undergone some real growth. And one of the issues that they're going to be talking about there is whether to expand the fire department and make it from an all-volunteer into a paid service. We're going to, as I said, we're going to begin tonight and talk about Burlington. But first, we're really happy to tell you that we have brought back Studio B, where tonight we're going to be carrying interviews with some of the people that are the candidates, as well as people that are involved in some of these very important issues. We're going to throw things over there right now and have you meet Emily Brewer, who's going to tell us how Studio B is going to work tonight. Emily?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Studio B. I'm super excited to be here tonight. We have a terrific lineup of guests that will be coming in speaking with us, and we hope you'll tune in later.
On some of the candidates as they through the doors here. So Diane, let's start in the Queen City of Burlington. What's at stake and what are the key races that you're really keeping an eye on?
Sure. So all 8 ward seats are up for re-election this town meeting day. 3 councilors are not running again. That's Chip Mason, who is the Democrat in Ward 5, Jane Stromberg, the progressive in Ward 8, and that's the one we're really going to pay attention to as we heard it from Exit Voices, and Max Tracy, City Council President, Ward 2 progressive, is also not running again. So we've got 3 open seats. Police reform, big issue, right? We've talked about that quite a bit. Rising tensions, rising workloads. Being a city council is not easy.
Yeah, it's been really, I think many councilors have said this has been a really rough year. There's been even some cases at city council meetings where people in the audience are shouting down other people in the audience as well as councilors themselves.
Yeah, and I think some of the folks have said that they're afraid for their safety. Which is interesting because we're talking about so we're talking about public safety, right, with the police department and all. But definitely, so that's knocked some people out. Some have still been willing to run again. So anyway, the one to look at, as far as I'm concerned, is Ward 8. And
why is Ward 8 so important?
Well, it's so important because it's an open seat. Because Jane Stromberg's not running again, and right now the progressives have 6 seats on a 12-member council. And although perhaps they can't pass everything they want, they can say no to a lot of things they don't want. So it's really the balance of power, right? So this seat there's a progressive, Ally House and Hannah King, the Democrat, are running in the seat. Both newcomers, recent UVM graduates. So this seat could very well flip. So this could change who has really control of the agenda moving into next year.
It's really, in a lot of ways, kind of an odd ward. I mean, if you look at it on the city map, it's up in the University District, and then there's a little sliver of it that comes down on Main Street.
Yep.
So it really is a lot of students. And I think one of the real keys is that getting students to vote. And we're not talking about a presidential election year. As somebody noted to me, Bernie Sanders isn't on the ballot. Right. There's really not a lot of reasons, is there, for students to be participating? No, it's not a mayoral year either. That's next year. I assume most of the students are back now, but I don't know, with remote learning and all, I mean, I don't really have a sense of what's going on there. So it has always been a ward with very low turnout. Yep. That's just what we've seen all along. It's also a new ward. Yeah. So people may not even know where do they vote. I mean, they're still ironing that out, I think. But it has been an issue, and that may change in the redistricting also. Yeah. Right. I mean, that's very possible. You got to wonder whoever created a situation where we have an even number of people on a city council. Yeah. That has not been the way it has been in the past. I remember covering the city council years back, and it was always an odd number. So yeah. But didn't we have 14? Didn't we have seven
7 wards of 2?
We did for a while, but before that, you know, I can always remember the New North End had 3, and that was sort of made things, gave it that odd number where issues could be decided one way or another. I mean, for example, this hiring of the police chief is one where what happened? It came out even.
Came out even, so it's a no. Yeah.
So what are so we talked about Ward 8.
Ward 8, I think that's the big one to watch. I think Ward 1 also. Zariah Hightower, the progressive incumbent, is running again. Rob Gutman, Democrat, running against her. She was part of that progressive wave that came in only 2 years ago. Believe it, it's only been 2 years. And it's going to be really interesting to see. She has changed her mind somewhat on the police department and sort of the staffing at the police department. It will be interesting to see if that's enough. I think people are really concerned about public safety. So I think that will be interesting. I think it is also really hard to unseat an incumbent. The benefits of being of incumbency are high, so it'll be interesting to see. I think Rob Gutman is fairly new to elected politics. I hadn't heard his name before, but there is some discussion that it's possible that could flip.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing too is that the Democrats have really been making an effort there. They see that as, you know, in addition to Ward 8, that's the one where they really see a potential to maybe make a change.
Do you think they have a better potential in 1 than 8?
No, not necessarily, but I think of all the other ones beside Ward 8, Ward 1 is probably the one where they can make a challenge. But I think you're right. I would certainly say Zariah Hightower is the favorite, but there's not a lot of other places where the Democrats have an opportunity.
Good point. Yes.
What else are you keeping your eye on?
Ward 5, Democrat Chip Mason, 15 years on the council, has relinquished his seat. I think talking a lot about what we talked about earlier, the difficulties of being a city councilor, the sort of tone that's out there. I think he was ready to move on. He's endorsed Ben Travers, also a Democrat. Challengers are Lenora Travis, who's running as an independent, and Fareed Munirsia, he's running as an independent, but he's progressive endorsed. So controversy there, Sears Lane. Right? It was a homeless encampment, big issue there, and apparently some of these folks decided to run because of that being the encampment being removed. So that'll be an interesting race.
You know, I had the opportunity to watch here on town meeting television. There were some great forums with the candidates. I have to say, I really found that the dynamic in that race was really interesting. You know, you've got sort of a traditional candidate, Ben Travers, he's a lawyer. And he would, in fact, one of the points that he made is that he would be the only lawyer on the city council, which is sort of fascinating.
Chip is a lawyer as well. Okay, and he was the only,
And, you know, Lenora Travis has got a fascinating story of moving here to Burlington. She had an apartment all set and ready to go. It fell through, and she really found a lot of challenges finding a place to live, which, as we know, is a big issue here in Burlington. And Fareed has got a fascinating story. He's been living here 25 years and does not really strike me as being kind of a hardcore progressive. And could really kind of vote anyway on some of these really important issues.
So truly an independent.
Truly an independent. Yep.
So we'll see what Ward 5 wants.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to find out.
Yeah. Let's talk about Ward 7.
Ward 7, that's New North End. Yeah. So Ali Jang, independent incumbent. He is being his challengers are Alexander Stith, who's a Democrat, who is Republican endorsed, and Olivia Taylor, who's an independent, who's progressive endorsed. And I don't know if this is partly because they didn't make the caucus dates. You know, that's why we have sort of people ran as independent and then they sort of found other ways to get endorsed. Anyhow, Ali Jang in the past has had both the progressive and the Democratic nod. So it's interesting. He's running truly as an independent now without either of those endorsements, which is an interesting statement, I think, from the parties. Anyhow, he's had 3 campaigns. He's been 3 terms. His challengers, Alexander is an engineer, and Olivia Taylor is a global development consultant. So we'll see. Ward 7, it's possible that could change. Again, incumbency is difficult to overcome, but fairly strong candidates, I think.
So we're going to tell you, too, now about the webpage at channel17.tv. We would encourage you throughout the evening, if you want to be following the results right along with us, that would be your place to go.
Great. So we'll go to Ward 3.
Let's talk about Ward 3.
Joe McGee, progressive incumbent, won a special election. He has not been in. He's only been in since for a few months. He is challenged by Christopher Aaron Felker, who's a Republican, which is interesting because I was trying to decide if a Republican has ever won in the Old North End, and I think the answer is no. Yep. The question is Christopher Aaron Felker setting up a race for mayor next year? I think that's the only thing I could come up with. So that's a possibility. He's also the chair of the Burlington GOP. He is the only Republican running in Burlington.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a statement in and of itself, isn't it?
It is. It absolutely is, yeah. So that's Ward 3. We don't expect that seat to turn. Then there are 3 races unopposed, right? Ward 2, Gene Bergman is actually new to the council in this round, progressive, old guard, progressive, if you will. That's Max Tracy's seat. Ward 4, Sarah Carpenter, the incumbent Democrat, is also running unopposed, as is Karen Paul, the Democrat in Ward 6.
We're going to head out right now to Winooski and give you a feature of some of the issues that are going on out there with our exit voices.
Good of him to come out. I was like, do a few things. I supervise the neurology department.
Oh man, I can find the photo.
That we received or were issued.
I love the small town community feel here and getting to vote in local elections where we know that the votes have a direct impact on what happens locally. So we're psyched.
Being involved within, any of city work and then any of the town work is really important. And then I love how this is a very active community. I love how there is a very full ballot of, a broad amount of people to choose from. So I'm really excited about the outcome and then to see, the great work that gets done here.
We have to increase funding for education. And I like the city council. There was a wide variety of choices for city council. It was very good. Very good.
How did you get informed about the issues?
Oh, I watched the debate on your TV. Yeah, that's a good website. I watched the city council debate.
It's important to me to vote today because I like the city of Winooski. Because of Winooski, it's like a small city, but it's not small city for people. It's a lot of people like to live over there, Winooski. Because of Winooski is important to anybody. Because of Winooski is help anybody. It's not see this is white people, this is black. No, is it help anybody?
I'm here because democracy is important. You look at what's going on in the world. What would Ukrainians give to have the simplicity of traveling half a mile to vote for the leadership in their country, for the propositions? We take it too much for granted. And it's really critical. So why would I possibly not vote today?
I think that the City Council of Winooski has for a long time been dominated by white folks, if I'm honest, and our population here in Winooski does not reflect that. And so I was really excited that we had a diversity of candidates, not just based on race, based on opinion, background, all of the brilliance that they all brought. I was really grateful to CCTV for the candidate forum being recorded, so that because I couldn't be there that night, so that I could watch later on. That was really helpful in me making a decision. I do stay up to date on the school board despite not having kids. I think a lot of folks often think if you don't have children attending schools in the school district, then maybe you're not as engaged in what's happening in our schools. But I'm very excited to see the construction happening down at the school and excited to see what that finalized project will look like.
I think it's really important to share your opinions on public issues. I own a home here. I have kids in school here. I can't complain about what's going on unless I share my opinions about what's going on. Plus, I love voting. It feels like such an important and exciting thing that we get to participate in, so I love taking advantage of it. I think growing up in Vermont, you get instilled with that town meeting day excitement from an early age, and I've never lost it, so I just think it's important.
We're just going here and Essex. And Mark Johnson. So Mark is actually
want to thank Barry Silver and Emily Brewer for that exit voices there from Winooski. Wow, I mean, the level of participation in Winooski is just really incredible.
It is. I really believe that Winooski is Burlington 30 years ago, which is dating myself, I admit. But still, I mean, just the excitement, the level of interest, the level of participation. 7 candidates for 2 council seats.
Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah. I mean, one person, Daryl DeSatel, was a city council years ago. Some other folks are fairly new to town. I mean, for that many people to put their hat in the ring, I think is really, really impressive. So we should also say that these 2 seats have been held by Hal Colston and Mike Myers, who are not running again. Hal Colston is also in the legislature as well. Folks put in a lot of time and energy into Winooski, and I think it's interesting that they step back and say, okay, we're ready for a new generation potentially to come into the city council. So we have a community news service. These are students from UVM who have been doing all sorts of really fantastic work around town meeting, and they have a discussion about all these 7 candidates that we're going to hear right now.
It's been a truly interesting election because in pre-COVID years you'd have to have a petition in order to be a candidate for city council, but post-COVID they kind of took away that requirement, so you would have formerly have to get about 30 signatures from voters in order to be considered as a candidate, and this year you don't have to do that. So we've had some very interesting candidates who didn't have that obstacle in order to petition. So we have 7 candidates, as you mentioned, vying for 2 seats, 2 two-year positions, and they'll be taking over for Hal Colston, our deputy mayor, whose seat is intended to expire in March, as well as Michael Myers. Our first candidate is Aurora Hurd. They use they/them pronouns, and they have a bit of political background. They served on the Bernie campaign in 2016 and 2020. They're really passionate about renters' rights, affordable housing, and kind of encouraging participation for all resident voting, and creating more accessibility for them to participate in local government. There's also Daryl DeSatel. He uses he/him pronouns, and he's 70 years old and a lifelong Winooski resident. He was really passionate about cutting down spending. He's kind of disappointed in the way that the city council is run currently. He thinks that currently there's a lot of political views being pushed and forced onto the residents, and he'd kind of like to bring a new voice to kind of just make sure Winooski is safe and running and functioning without those political views being forced. And we also have David Wallace, who is also running for school board. He's 53 years old and has been living in Winooski since 2013. He's originally from Arlington, Virginia. He has a bachelor's degree in business from Belmont Abbey College in North Carolina, and he's really passionate about being tough on crime and making sure the police are fully funded. Matt Crawford is 56. He grew up in St. Albans, and he's been living in Winooski since November of 2020. So yeah, he's excited to be able to implement new ways to create accessibility for all residents, and to create environmental resilience and infrastructure and kind of bolster local businesses. We also have Irene Kurubu Webster. She's 54 years old, and she's lived in Winooski for about 15 years, but she's originally from Kenya. So she comes in with a really interesting perspective on all resident voting and the diversity within Winooski's community. And she speaks both English and Swahili, and she works with the Association of Africans Living in Vermont as a caseworker. So she's been able to do a lot of community outreach and cultural advocacy, and she'd like to bring this to the city council as well. And then we have Thomas Renner. He uses he/him pronouns. He's 32 and moved to Winooski about 5 years ago. He is currently serving on the Safe, Healthy, Connected People Commission in Winooski, which is kind of like a policy advising group for the city council. And he's the commission secretary as well as a member. And so he's excited to create open spaces in Winooski, like parks that people of all ages can engage in. And lastly, there's Chad Bushway, who uses he/him pronouns. He's 49 years old and has lived in Winooski since 2004. And his whole life he's worked in the automotive industry. And he is excited to keep property tax down to make housing more affordable. And he would like to look into making investments in the water and sewage system and kind of updating that.
19.tv. Thank you. Oh.
All right, we want to thank the folks to get us up to speed. That was a great presentation.
Those are our replacements.
Yeah.
They really are. I can see it.
That's the next generation. Yeah. We too want to remind you too that throughout the course of the evening to make sure you check out ch17.tv and you can follow along the results with us. Let's head back to Burlington for a couple of minutes here before we wrap up. We got some serious money issues on the table here. Maybe you could start with the city tax increase proposal.
Yeah. So there's a tax rate proposed of a 5.5% increase, which is 4 cents, if you prefer it that way. And this is really being sold as inflation. So existing services that we have, and this is sort of an inflation factor that everyone is feeling. Average household will pay about $150 additional per year. I think that's always an interesting number to use because it really helps you get a sense of what it's really going to cost a household.
And let me just stop you. This is on top of after the reappraisal, many people are also paying more anyway.
Especially residential, right? And this was an interesting case where the commercial didn't go up as much as the residential did. So definitely feeling this hit, and they'll feel this hit again. The interesting thing about this is that it's being sold as this inflation thing, but 1.25 million of this will be for 7 new staffers at the Office of Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging, bringing that office to 14 staffers. So that's a big chunk of this, which is why a lot of the progressive counselors have supported this tax increase, which is interesting. So the last time the mayor asked for a increase was in 2020, which was a public safety tax, the ambulance in the New North End, and some money for the Housing Trust Fund. So that was 2 years ago. And this has to pass by a simple majority.
Okay. Yep. And speaking of public safety, one of the bond issues that we're going to be talking about in much more depth later on deals with fire trucks.
It does. 3 new fire trucks, right? And plus a whole bunch of other things. Sidewalks, $1 million from Memorial Auditorium, and some infrastructure work as well. This is the item that was in the November election, which was voted down at about $40 million. Now we're at about $24 million for this particular. This is a general obligation bond, and it must pass by 2/3.
Right.
So that's a pretty high bar.
It is, because it actually got a majority last time around, but not a super majority.
Exactly. And this, the household impact starts at about $36 a year, and by the time it's done, about $90 per year in additional for the average household in Burlington. Again, this is a capital project, general obligation bond.
I was fascinated today when I headed to the polls looking at the school tax proposal because I think, to be blunt, I think it's a little confusing what's going on. When you read the ballot, it talks about a 13% increase, but really what's going on there is that the schools have lost a number of students. So the per cost for students has gone up just because there are fewer students, though you still have to heat the buildings to the same degree, whether there are 10 students or 100 students.
This is the declining enrollment.
Yeah, and there's some 200 students less, and who knows why, I'm sure.
Demographics? Is this just demographics?
I think there's some demographics. I think also there are people who are not opting to go to the high school, who are maybe going to some of the alternative high schools in the area. We have this downtown, high school that some people are not turned on about. One of the things too that I'm sure we'll get into more later in the evening is lurking in the background here is in November. We're probably going to see a pretty significant issue on the ballot talking about a new high school. But really the increase for the schools this year is closer to 3%. And I'm not sure how well that's been explained to people. So I'm going to be really interested to see how well that fares. If people are going to understand that or not.
And then there was this whole idea that they're actually going to, there's a possibility of it decreasing because of the school funding throughout the whole state. There's a surplus, right? So they're saying, well, it may go down. But then I was reading, well, it may, but we're not guaranteed. So we're in this funny spot because we just don't have all the information yet.
Well, and a lot of it depends on what the state folks want to do, how much of that they want to keep from themselves. And they had on the ballot today, if all of that money were to be put back into the schools, that people in Burlington could see something close to a 6% decrease, but we'll see whether or not the state officials don't try to carve out a little bit of that money for themselves.
Because the governor there's $90 million, and the governor has proposed $45 million to go to this sort of decrease of taxes. So that's a big difference, and we're still a long ways away.
And we haven't even gotten into the whole tax increment financing,
No,
which
we're
not going to try to do right here in this segment, because that's going to take us a few minutes to explain to you. And also, we want to remind you, too, that the polls are still open here for another hour and 5 minutes. That's right. So if you haven't voted yet, and these are items that are of interest to you, this would be the time for you to get down to the polls. And we are looking forward to having you back and joining us here in just a little over an hour. And we look forward to bringing you some of the candidates, some of the winners, some of the losers, people that are involved in some of the issues. And of course, we do want to remind you to make sure you follow along on our webpage at ch17.tv. I'm Mark Johnson along with Diane Meyerhoff, and stay tuned. We'll be back in just about an hour.